it this way, there's extra benefit. Okay, so now there's new items. New items including Adaptive Helm. Adaptive Helm is basically a Spirit Visage. It's a lot of the same stats as Spirit Visage, with a unique passive of taking magic damage from a spell or effect reduces all subsequent magic damage from that spell or effect by 15% for 4 seconds. Which means if you're taking damage from like an Evelyn E or a Karthus Q or his E, if you're taking damage from a Rise or a Cassiopeia, it is the anti-machine gun mage tank item. So look at the efficiency of the item. Right, here's how much health and value you get from it, how much MR and value you get from that, the CDR, the health regen. And you can see that, yeah, you're paying mostly for health and magic resist. It's only 84% efficient. And that means for this item to be good, you need to get 440 gold out of the unique passive. You need 440 gold worth of the unique passive. Now, if you are a level 18 tank with no runes and masteries and no items at all, and you have just this item for MR, this magic damage reduction is worth 28 magic resist. This is worth 28 MR plus 18% of all other MR purchases in the game. So if you have bought 100 MR from other sources because you have runes and masteries and a Spirit Visage, this is worth 18 plus 28 MR is 46. Now it's only against the one champion and only against that ability, right? It doesn't affect Maokai in any way. The enemy Maokai. It doesn't affect the enemy Victor's ult's first shot. It doesn't affect the Cassiopeia's ultimate. It doesn't affect the Cassiopeia's W. Sorry, it doesn't affect the Rise's W. It doesn't affect the Ashe ultimate that does magic damage. It doesn't affect the Graves smoke screen. It doesn't affect the Zac E. It doesn't affect the Zac Q, right? Any long cooldown ability is not reduced. In my mind, this seems like a weak ability or a weak item. This is a situational only item. This is, I'm laning against a freaking Teemo and I'm tired of his E and his ultimate because it is immediately good against dots, right? It is immediately going to say, oh, I'm taking damage from poison darts, damage reduced. I'm taking damage from poison traps, damage reduced. But it is not a good generalist MR item. It is 84% efficient, and this MR does not affect half the enemy team comp. Situational, but probably fine for the situation. Because keep in mind, again, the item scales with other MR. The gold value of % damage reduction goes up the more MR you have, which means it's probably not a rush item. I mean, I don't think it's like the item you rush against Teemo in lane. Maybe it is. Yeah, it's good against Rumble. Exactly. That's a great chat brought up. Rumble is a good example. It won't affect his first E, but it'll affect his second one. Okay, let's move on. New tank item, Gargoyle Stone Plate. Okay, lots of, fairly cheap. 2,500 gold is a little bit cheap for a tank item. 40 armor, 40 MR, another 40 armor and MR if 3 or more enemy champions are around, and then an active that gives you 40 to 100% max HP as bonus HP, but reduces your damage by a lot, which doesn't have to matter. Basically what this does is it means you can't like do mathy things and say, well, I'm Sejuani, if I hit this, I have more damage with my W. It's like, no, you're not going to. It's not going to happen. It's almost impossible for that to happen. So let's look at the efficiency of this item. The efficiency of Gargoyle Stone Plate. Okay, 40 armor is this much, 40 MR is this much, and we're just going to assume it's in the team fight. If it's not, you're at this sort of 60% efficiency thing. And if you're in a team fight, you're getting double the value, which makes it super efficient. In a team fight, this item is bonkers good. This is 80 armor and MR for 2,500 gold, which is 121% gold efficient. Holy moly, that's before the active. That's before the active. Oh, baby. Someone in chat said, amazing for ARAM. You're absolutely right. This thing is good in ARAM. This item's real strong. Now, again, what's interesting is it is not a good item for Juggernauts. If you're playing Darius, you don't want the 60% damage reduction. And if you're playing as Fiora or Darius or whatever, and you're split pushing in lane, it doesn't do much for you. Now, worth pointing out, again, the item is inefficient in 2-on-2s. It is great in team fights with the passive, which doubles the stats in the items. But if you're in a one-on-one, this does not help you very much. It is very inefficient. So while it is incredibly good in that context, you need to be in that context. Okay. Those are the new things. Again, I think this is probably a bit weak. Situationally can be bought. This is very good if you're going to get into team fights. I would expect to see it pretty frequently in games because that's even without the active, it was incredibly gold efficient. So I expect to see the item. Okay, durability items are getting changed. Basically, pretty much every hybrid health armor or health MR item is getting less health and more of the armor or magic resist. Their total gold efficiency is staying almost identical in all cases. They're usually losing 200 gold worth of armor and gaining 200, or losing 200 gold worth of health and gaining 200 gold worth of armor or MR. And we're going to go into that in a little bit. But first we're going to talk about the fact that Sunfire Cape is getting a change to its burn damage, okay? So instead of 26 to 43, it's 12 to 29, which is obviously a big hit. It's 14 less damage. But it does triple damage to minions that have 1.5x to minions. Monsters as well, by the way. But the radius is also down. Balmy Cinder, same radius hit. And Cinder Hulk now matches Sunfire Cape's damage values. So let's look at this. Here's Sunfire Cape's burn in the old version compared to the new version. Now, it's unethical to talk about it pre-5 because you can't buy the item quickly. In fact, even 5 is probably too early game, but I had to pick a number to start with, and I wanted to be a little bit inclusive. So the damage to champions is between half to 2/3 the damage. It's realistically more like starting around here, like level 8, but it's, you know, basically half to 2/3 the damage. And keep in mind, as we saw earlier, the radius is also down, so you are less likely to burn people. Now, it is still twice your auto attack range. You're still going to burn people you're autoing. That's still there, but the damage to champs has been cut down. Now, that said, the damage to minions is up 5 to 35%. So its wave clear got better, provided that you can get into range, which shouldn't be that hard. Same thing with Cinder Hulk, by the way. We'll go into that in a second. Damage to champs is down. Damage to minions is up. Cinder Hulk. Damage to champs less nerfed, kind of as it points out. By the time you buy the item, it's 80% as good against champs, which is fine. 80% is good. It's not too bad. It's, you know, less nerfed than Sunfire. And it comes down to that same 2/3 value, as you can see. Damage to champs is, you know, it ends at the same place because it used to. Now, tank jungles didn't usually hit level 18. That's unfair to think of it. So, you know, you're looking at these levels sort of 14, 15, 9, you know, the 80 to 70 range is kind of what, like, the world you're actually living in. It's 80 to 70% as good against champions, which is less of a nerf. But again, there's still that radius nerf, which hurts you. But on the upside, this item is now better against minions and monsters. I know it says minions here, but it's both. It's monsters as well. So Cinder Hulk clears the jungle faster, hurts champions a bit less. Okay, that's the world we live in. That's what that is. Better wave clear, less champion fighting. If you really want the champion fighting items, you buy an Iceborne Gauntlet or something like that. But it leeches damage off tanks, which is kind of the point of all these changes, is leeching damage off of the tanks because they were killing people too easily anyway. And I kind of tend to agree. Now, we will cover the fact that Sunfire Cape has different health and armor soon. We will cover Spirit Visited Spectre's Cowl soon. I'm first going to cover the fact that Dead Man's Plate has some health and armor changes. The fact that Randuin's has some health and armor changes. Okay, so let's talk about this. So Sunfire Cape, we already talked about the fact that the passive changed. Health went down, armor went up. Dead Man's Plate, health went down, armor went up. Momentum stacks faster. You can no longer get partial damage with Crushing Blow. If you don't manage to get full stacks, you're just going to consume the stacks and get nothing out of it. But when it does stack, it stacks faster. So you're more likely to get a full stack Crushing Blow, but you're also, in those mediocre situations, not like going to randomly gain 6 damage. Because a lot of the times, like, Dead Man's Plate would be like a really minor, like, a really sort of weird minor, basically this is 6 DPS, right? You gained 12.5 momentum per second while moving, and you gained 0.5 damage from momentum stack. So you kind of gained like just 6 DPS for free by being in combat with a Dead Man's Plate, so that's gone. The 6 DPS of Dead Man's Plate is gone. But it takes 5 seconds to full charge, which means you're, you know, getting back up to full steam sooner, and then it does the same damage as before. Okay, so Dead Man's Plate, again, stat adjustments. Randuin's Omen just straight loses health, but it gains more crit damage reduction, it gains more active slow, and I'm pretty certain it's keeping the passive attack speed slow. I don't see why it would go away. So here's all the armor items. Top row is Sunfire Cape, new on the left, old on the right. Dead Man's Plate, new on the left, old on the right. Randuin's Omen, new on the left, old on the right. Let's talk about Sunfire Cape. 80% efficient to 80% efficient, right? If you consider the Sunfire Cape burn worth 600 gold, sure, it got weaker in most cases, but if you do, the item's still good. Great. Dead Man's Plate. 80.5, 80.5, still the same stat line, right? Again, less health, more armor. You can see where the stats are attributed is now 40 and 40 instead of 45, 35. Dreadnought is the same damage, the same movement speed, just stacks differently. Again, if you consider that move speed and stuff worth 600 gold, then the item is good for you. Once again, same kind of situation. That's what you're paying for with these items, right? In both these cases, they're only 80% efficient. They were before as well. Great. Randuin's Omen is actually going from 87% efficient to 73% efficient if you don't want the uniques on it, which means it's now a worse general tank item, which means if you're Ashe trying to not die to Talon, where you don't care about the attack speed reduction, you don't care about the crit reduction, you don't care about the active slow, you're no longer buying Randuin's for this. Now they have a new item, we'll go into that in a little bit later, but you know, this is not a one-stop shop armor item. So there's 767 missing gold in this item that you need to pay for with attack speed reduction, crit reduction, and active slow. I would pay this much gold for those stats. That seems pretty good. This is a 50% damage reduction to auto attackers. This is a, let me make up a number, 15, 10, depends on how much crit they have, percent damage reduction to critters, people who would crit you. Right, so if you are needing to deal with the 80% crit Caitlyn, yeah, these are still pretty useful stats for you. And of course, the active slow being better is nice as well. Randuin's still worth buying as we look at these numbers, but again, it's that. Someone in chat said, isn't Randuin's active 4 seconds? Oh, it went from 35 for 4 to 55 to 2. So I misread that in my own notes, so I apologize that my chart is slightly wrong. The duration was halved, but the potency was roughly doubled. As we talked about with the Maokai changes earlier, generally speaking, higher potency, lower duration. I mean, this is a 1.1 instead of a 1.4. Like the net slow value is close enough that I would say higher potency, lower duration is just strictly better. In my mind, this is almost always a buff. That's my take on it, my analysis. You don't have to agree, but I mean, I hate 4-second long slows. They're super annoying, and this is certainly much more potent. So I would generally consider this a buff. This is obviously a buff, and it's paying for the lack of stats. Okay. So let's talk about the fact that the magic resist items Spirit Visage and Spectre's Cowl got updates. Spectre's Cowl got straight nerfed by 5 MR. Spirit Visage got its health reduced, its MR gained, and the bonus healing received increased. Now keep in mind, Spirit Visage still had the health regen on it. So let's talk about it. Spectre's Cowl, new versus Spectre's Cowl's old. Spectre's Cowl used to be gold efficient without the unique passive. It was already just a good item. Like, there's a reason everyone bought it, because the item was freaking insane. And then, of course, it still had the healing buff, which is up to 450 gold of value if you're constantly in combat, which obviously is not really the case, but you only really need regen if you're doing things with it. Right, you only need regen if you're taking damage. If you're taking damage, you apply the passive. So, this item was just kind of a little bit stupid. So it lost some value. It lost 5 MR. And again, it's still 93% efficient before this up to 450 gold value unique passive. It's obviously not on all the time, sure. But it doesn't really take much for this item to be worth it, obviously. Item's still pretty good. Now, Spirit Visage, of course, health down, MR up. Worth pointing out, the overall efficiency has gone down of the item. Worth pointing out, of course, we're putting a lot of stock into the HP 5. Worth noting that because the item gives you 30% more healing and regen, it multiplies your base regen and the item's regen, meaning that even though it reads 200% more HP 5, it's really 290% more HP 5, because you get 30 from your base stats and an extra 60 from the item itself. So the actual HP 5 went from 275 to 290. So it actually gained, 50 gold worth of health regen. And even with that, it's still less efficient. You're still getting less gold value of stats. Obviously, it used to be almost 50% efficient for health. Now it's very much not the case anymore. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're even just completely discounting the HP 5, which you shouldn't, but if you did, this item is still about 90% efficient before the healing debuff, before the HP 5. It's still very good. This item is still incredibly, incredibly strong. But technically it did lose efficiency. So the item did get nerfed. All right, Warmog's armor got some changes. Its stats are practically identical. The health threshold for activating the item is better by 250. It's worth noting that this item lost 150 HP. This item lost 75 HP. This item lost 75 HP. This item lost 75 HP. So items lost 75 to 150, and the difference is 250. So you would need to have bought like 3 or 4 nerfed tank items before like this is anything but a buff, really. And realistically, it's not going to happen anyway, because by the time you bought 3 or 4, you hit the threshold anyway. So basically, Warmogs, you just threshold much sooner on Warmogs. That's what it comes down to. You threshold much sooner on Warmogs. You can almost get it first item in its stacks now. It's pretty close. The health regen got buffed by 40% when you're out of combat. The cooldown even comes in much faster. And minion damage even has a less effect of punching in the cooldown. Basically, Warmogs got way stronger. It was already gold efficient, by the way. If you look at the HP 5 and the CDR and stuff, I mean, these didn't change in any way at all. And what I did is I said, if you have 1500 base health, which is very low for a tank and moderate for a squishy, you're like level 15 or whatever, you have 1500 health on a squishy, and you buy at Warmogs, you only needed 450 HP to trigger it. Which means, like, okay, if you're Ashe, you still need a Dead Man's Plate, question mark, or that's kind of random. But if you're like a level 12 Darius, you get a Black Cleaver and you're there. It's actually worth pointing out, by the way, level 18 Darius hits threshold with just Warmogs, even in the old version. Like, Darius is like 2300 HP at level 18. It's really high. Just as a random example. So this item got better. Other people are going to buy it. Technically, the math says you should. The more armor and MR you have, the more you want health as a stat. Since I think Warmogs is already a good item, I'm just going to say I think we're going to see Warmogs more in League of Legends. I don't know if that's true, but I think there's a decent chance of it. Okay, so this one is a little bit confusing to keep track of. Basically, Banshees Veil and Abyssal Scepter got updated together. So Banshees Veil still has the spell shield, and it took the stats of Abyssal Scepter. Abyssal Scepter still has the magic damage aura, and it took the stats of old Banshees Veil. Now, I know this is kind of weird, and people have expressed concern of, like, wait a second, why are my mid laners now buying Banshees, and why are tanks now buying Abyssal? That feels weird. Now, I actually think that Riot made the right choice in doing it the way they did, because when you're playing League of Legends and you press tab and you see, oh, this guy is a Banshees Veil, you know he has a spell shield. And when you say, oh, this Amumu has Abyssal Scepter, you know he has a magic damage aura around him, right? If you're playing against these champions and you press tab and see those items, you say, oh, he has Banshees. Someone poke off the shield. And instead learning, oh, he has Abyssal Scepter, poke off the shield, I think is a worse situation than having mid laners relearn what they're buying. And that's how I feel about it. So I think the right choice was made here, but obviously the items are going to be a little bit confusing for a short time. I don't think it was perfect, but this is I think the best of the situations. Okay, so Banshees Veil, sorry about that. So Banshees Veil is thing is I'm drawing comparisons from Banshees to Abyssal. So I'm just going to pull up the chart, and we're not going to read the patch notes, okay? Okay. Read the top line. This is the item that mid laners bought. They used to buy the old Abyssal Scepter. It cost 2750 gold. Let me double check something real quick. Hold on. 2500, 2800. Did I do something wrong? I think I did something wrong. I might have put in the wrong... Okay, yeah. This is the wrong value for what Banshees Veil actually costs. For some reason, I thought it was 2,700 instead of 2,500. It's even better than you think. Okay, so mid laners used to buy Abyssal Scepter, which gave 60 AP, 60 MR, and some CDR, and it cost this much money. Okay? The item is basically now... It's called Banshees Veil, but it's 70 AP instead of 60 AP. It's 45 MR instead of 60 MR. It's still 10 CDR, and the cost is actually not 2,700. It's actually 2,500. So it's incredibly cheap. It gives you a crap ton of stats. Basically, you're paying 500 gold for the 20 MR. And for some reason, my brain is not working in terms of doing this math properly. Like, I feel like I did something wrong somewhere because this now doesn't make sense to me, but I don't know why it doesn't make sense to me. I think I'm just being crazy. Okay, so again, Banshees Veil is now, like, Abyssal Scepter. The old Abyssal Scepter is now Banshees Veil. The stats are almost 1-to-1. It just has a spell shield instead of the magic damage aura. Okay, that's the change. And this is actually 2,500 gold. Cost of the efficiency is insanely good. This is an insanely good item. Now, what's interesting is I want to talk about a metagame point real quick. Because mid laners used to buy a Negatron Cloak. When they were buying the old Abyssal Scepter, they would buy a Negatron Cloak and sit on it and like finish a Morellonomicon or finish Sork Shoes or buy some other items, and then later on, as their second or third item, they would then finish Abyssal Scepter. And a Negatron Cloak cost about 800 gold and had 40 magic resist on it. Banshees Veil now builds from Null Magic Mantle and not Negatron Cloak. What that means is, as a mid laner, you can't sit on Negatron Cloak anymore. You sit on Null Magic Mantle, or you finish Banshees Veil. Now, the thing is, Banshees Veil, again, assuming the patch notes are correct, is 2,500 gold, is so cheap that you're spending 2,000 gold on 70 AP, 10 CDR, 20 magic resist, and a spell shield, which is super duper efficient, and I'm pretty certain it means that if you're not rushing Morellonomicon, every mid laner is rushing Banshees Veil, the new and improved AP value Banshees Veil, which I don't know if it's a good thing or not. Everyone's running on spell shields, but this is seemingly insanely efficient. And I'm a little bit surprised it's not 2,700 gold, because when it first came out on PBE, it was 2,700 gold. And then according to the patch notes, it's 2,500 gold. Which, again, I'm still have a hard time believing, but might actually be the case. And I'm going to do some quick math in my head. 850 plus 800 is 1,650, plus 450 is 2,000 something. Yeah, that's 2,500 gold. All right, so the item's just insane. Now let's talk about the tank item. Let's talk about new Abyssal Scepter, aka old Banshees Veil. All right, if you were, a jungle Sejuani or a jungle tank who needed the MR aura, if you were a jungle, just needed the MR, right? If you're a jungle tank, a top lane tank, and you really, really needed a second magic resist item after your Visage, because Visage is stupidly strong. Well, it used to be 300 health, 70 MR, some health regen, a pretty cheap item, and it used to give you a spell shield. And it was 96% efficient, which ain't too bad. It was 96% efficient. And now we have our little Abyssal Scepter here, which is 300 health, almost the same, 65 MR, almost the same, HP 5100, almost the same, CDR of 10, which is new, and that's 300 gold, roughly, of CDR. But the item, obviously, is 350 gold more expensive. It went from 2,450 to 2,800. We lost 5 MR, we gained 10 CDR, and we lost the spell shield, and unfortunately I cut it off because I'm stupid. They gained the magic damage aura. This doesn't seem that great. You're in a situation where you need this aura to be worth it, which, to be fair, getting 10% more damage costs a fair bit of AP. Like, to be completely fair, 10% damage is 10% damage. That's pretty good. That's useful, and we might see like an Amumu buy it or something, who knows. But buying Abyssal Scepter is the selfless choice to give up tank stats to up my Cassiopeia mid's damage by 10%. And that might be worth it. That might be a thing you want to do to help out the team, but it's not a freebie. And unless I've done the math wrong, which I don't believe I've done, you have a 2,800 gold item with an 800 gold combined cost without a lot of item efficiency onto it. It's going to take, some getting used to. Okay, Guardian Angel is getting updated. Cost the same. It is losing 30 armor. It is losing all its magic resist, but it is gaining 40 attack damage. So it's losing 3/4 of its tank stats, and it's gaining 40 attack damage. It is also, instead of restoring max HP, it's restoring base health. So instead of 30% max HP, it's 50% base HP, meaning that if you buy tank items and you want to be a tanky champion, this only provides 30 armor for 2,400 gold, and the revive does not scale with your health purchases. So it is way, way, way worse on tanks. And what's interesting is also a little bit worse on juggernauts. It's still good on them. They have very high base health, but considering they're buying a Black Cleaver and a Titanic Hydra and things like that, it's still a thing. So Guardian Angel new, Guardian Angel old. Still 83% gold efficient. I'm going to sneeze. But you can see it loses 600 gold of armor and 800 gold of MR, but it gains 1,400 gold worth of attack damage. More than half the cost of the Guardian Angel is going straight into HP. More than half the cost of Guardian Angel is going into HP. Or sorry, into AD. I misread, sorry. Someone corrected me on the Banshees Veil numbers. I want to look at that real quick. Doesn't really matter. It's not that important to me right now. Either way, it's you're paying some amount of gold for the spell shield, and you have to make that distinction for yourself. If the numbers are wrong in the patch notes, then that can be corrected later. Anyway, so Guardian Angel, basically, it makes it much better on attack damage squishies. The Lucians and the Ashes of the world have a more attractive Guardian Angel. Now, it does not help them against magic damage dealers. GA no longer helps you survive the Syndra. I mean, you'll revive and everything, but it doesn't help against Syndra. It's only really good against Zed. But the nice thing is you already had, like, Maw and Mortius and Scimitar and stuff for the magic damage dealers. So it's interesting because ADCs can rejoice they have a Guardian Angel that's tailor-suited to them. But keep in mind that it's only 30 armor. And there is no longer a generalist tank item for squishies, right? Master Yi no longer gets a ton of armor and MR. He's getting some attack damage and 2 cloth armors, right? So we better make use of that revive. So it's a worse tank item. I think it's a good change. I think Guardian Angels being on tanks everywhere was kind of annoying. It made it pretty frustrating to face them, so that's cool. Yeah, good on AD Assassins too. Champions like Talon and whatnot are going to enjoy this. So Steric's Gage, some major updates as well. The base attack damage buff is higher. The health is higher. The lifeline, instead of being 30% max HP, is now 75% bonus HP. And the bonus additional base damage, right, instead of being 25 plus 25, is now 30 plus 40, which is obviously pretty substantial. And so we look at Steric's once again. I assumed you had 100 base attack damage for this. I had to make up a number to come up with a value. But basically, Steric's Gage is now 80% efficient instead of 75% efficient. The lifeline attack damage is obviously much higher. You only need to get 500 gold worth of value out of the 2 passives, which is going to be easy to do for this item to be efficient. Of course, it definitely will be. This is the number right here. You have to have bought 1,121 health otherwise for the shield to be higher. I'm already counting. I think I looked at like a level 18 Darius, I think is what I looked at. I think I looked at a level 18 Darius, and I already counted the Steric's Gage health and said, okay, if you're a level 18 Darius with a Steric's Gage, how much HP do I have to buy for this to work? Now, if it's earlier into the game and you're a lower level champion, this is a lower level result as well because your max HP is lower because your base HP is lower. It doesn't affect the bonus HP roll. So basically, the expectation is after you buy a Titanic Hydra and a Black Cleaver and a Giant's Belt-ish, It is always stronger. If you're not level 18, you need less than that. And also worth pointing out, it's 8 seconds instead of 3. As we pull up the patch notes once again, 8-second shield instead of a 3-second shield. And because the shield decays, a longer duration means a slower decay, which means the shield is also stronger. So the shield is also stronger. Basically, these all just feel like buffs to Sterix Gage, and as a Juggernaut, I mean, I guess you're not getting Guardian Angel quite the same anymore, but you're getting this Sterix Gage. And it's really, really nice. It's a strong item. Sterix wasn't really bought for a while, so it's kind of cool. It also means, by the way, this item is no longer very good on, like, Graves and Ashen and Callisto, who are like, oh, I just really want that, like, one tank item, hee. It's like, well, I guess I'll get more damage out of it, but it's going to be a 300-point shield. Like, Sterix is just worse than Maw of Memortius and Hex Drinker. Because those items have defensive stats on them other than just the shield. So generally speaking, this gets poached less, and it's more often bought by tank bros. Okay, let's move on. Dorrance Shield, substantially huge buffs. Cost went down, health the same, regen the same. Now this damage reduction was actually really huge, but it's replaced by damage on hit and health regen when taking damage. So you can see the efficiency of just the health and the HP 5. I had to make up a number for the HP 5. I think I assumed if you had like a base of 7 health per 5, that this is what the regen would be. You have to make up a number, you know, because most items are percent regen, not flat regen. So maybe you disagree with my numbers of 225 here. But basically the item gained in efficiency, obviously, because the cost went down. 8 damage reduction on every damage hit. 8 damage reduced on every piece of damage hit, right, is a lot. It's 8 damage every single time. It became 10 health over 5 seconds every single time. If you got hit more than once, this immediately is worse, right? Sorry, it's actually, to be fair, it's 20 health over 10 seconds. So if you get hit literally exactly once, Dorrance Shield is better. This passive is better. If they are all-inning you in any way at all, it is substantially worse. So it is better against poke. It helps you last hit because tanks often don't have high attack damage. It is substantially better against poke. You'd have to get hit, basically if you get hit 3 times every 20 seconds, it's about the same. And that's kind of the break even on that. 2.5 times every 20 seconds. Or within 20 seconds, I should say. Dorrance Shield, arguably stronger item for sustaining in a lane. Worse for all-ins. Alright, major updates to lifesteal items. Blade of the Ruin King less efficient. Death's Dance gains a lot of stats. Bloodthirster gains stats. Ravenous Hydra gains stats. They now have 80 attack damage, which is quite nice. 80 attack damage is a thing. So, Blade of the Ruin King, by the way, is an insanely efficient item. I wanted to actually just point out how good Blade of the Ruin King is, that people kind of can understand it. So the item used to be 3,300 gold. You paid for attack damage, you paid for attack speed, you paid for lifesteal, and then you had 700 gold unclaimed. 8% current HP damage to be worth 700 gold. If we look at a pickaxe gives you 25 attack damage for 875 gold. Okay, well this is less than a pickaxe, but to do 25 damage with a pickaxe, you just bought a pickaxe. To do 25 damage with current health damage, they had to have 300 HP. 8% of 300 is 24. So if they had 300 HP on them and you attacked them, it was efficient for the on-hit damage. Now, to be fair, on-hit damage does not scale Piercing Light or the Culling or anything. It doesn't scale bullet time. But 300 is the break even for that? It's a little insane. So it's less efficient by 100 gold. Still insane. Still an incredibly good item. But considering that every bot laner ever was just rushing this item for 3,400 gold and smashing everyone's butts, probably deserves a small nerf. Death's Dance, Bloodthirster, Hydra, all getting some attack damage buffs. Just kind of show you the efficiency on them. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they all got 5 damage. They're more efficient. Congratulations. Math is hard. But worth pointing out that Death's Dance, old versus new, it's now gold efficient without the extra physical vamp. Like, I already counted lifesteal for auto attacks. That happens regardless. But the extra vamp and the damage defer, which, by the way, this one got doubled, even without that, it's gold efficient. So Death's Dance seems like it's insane. And considering that Steric's Gage got pushed away from, like, the Graves and the Rangars of the world, this is more likely to be bought on those champions, and, you know, it becomes a tank item. What's funny is a shield that gives you 30% max HP, it absorbs 30% max HP damage, is functionally almost the same as 30% damage reduction. It's not exactly. They're both for number reasons and actually damage taken reasons. But it's similar enough that it's kind of worth comparison, that this 30% damage defer is almost the same as the old Steric's shield. Kind of ish. I'm kind of lying, but it's close enough. And as long as you can leech it back, you can make it for the true damage burn afterwards. Bloodthirster. The reason people buy the item, by the way, is not because it's gold efficient. You can see it wasn't efficient, still isn't. But the gold value of the 350-point shield, if you could overheal all the way at level 18, is worth 900 gold worth of stats. As you can see, the item's only inefficient by 150. So if you can make use of even a quarter of the shield, it's gold efficient. There's a reason people bought Bloodthirster. And Ravenous Hydra also becomes gold efficient without the passives. Kind of goes the same way as Death's Dance, where this item is now gold efficient on its own. Okay, maybe you don't want HP 5, but the T-Mat passive and T-Mat active are still nice to have. You're really not paying for them anymore. Obviously, it's just 5 AD, but I wanted to give you the charts because, hey, why not? Major buffs to critical strike items. Infinity Edge, it seems like the Essence Reaver, so either they're missing Essence Reaver from the patch notes, because Essence Reaver was lowered in cost on PBE, but is not in the patch notes. I don't know which one to believe. I tend to trust patch notes, but big patches like this, there tend to be mistakes, so we could be wrong here. Either way, Infinity Edge is cheaper by 200 gold, Zeal's cheaper by 100 gold, and Kirscheiss Shard, 50 gold more expensive, but 10 more proc damage, and so I'm going to show you item efficiency on those. Infinity Edge new versus old. Worth pointing out, by the way, IE is now gold efficient on its own. It used to not be. It's really easy to do the math on this, by the way, the critical damage thing. Right? The critical damage gain, what it actually means is simply multiply your critical strike chance by 1.5. Done. Right? So whatever your crit strike chance is, take half that, and that's the gold value of the unique passive. So an Infinity Edge had 20 crit on it. And it has 20 crit, meaning the crit damage is worth 10 crit. And as you can see here, 20 crits worth 800 gold. And 10 crits worth 400 gold. And that efficiency is kind of crap. Like, I guess it's technically there, but it's not pretty. So instead, it's now much more efficient. And feels good, man. Yeah, okay, sorry. My brain AFK'd for a second, but we're good. Oh, and actually it's worth pointing out, by the way, that a lot of these calculations are... So the reason that this looked efficient, by the way, I want to take a quick caveat here, is I'm valuing attack damage at the conversion of longsword. When you're actually at Infinity Edge, you are holding onto a BF sword and a pickaxe, which are already more efficient than a longsword is. Right? And so you're already holding on to efficient attack damage. You weren't gaining this extra attack damage efficiency by combining Infinity Edge. You were simply spending the 600-something gold combined cost on 10 crit chance. Which is why this wasn't efficient. You were paying 300, like, trust me, it just wasn't efficient. Now you're only paying 150 for the crit damage, and you know, the efficiency is there now, basically. It's really minor, but it makes Infinity Edge rush a bit better. The really big thing is that Zeal got insanely more efficient. We're valuing the move speed, by the way, as if you had 325 base, if you had no boots in your Ash, then the 5% move speed from Zeal is worth 211.25 gold. And so you can see it was already efficient to buy a Zeal. It's now even more efficient to buy a Zeal. Which, by the way, means that even though we buffed Infinity Edge, and now going BF Sword Pickaxe and just finishing IE is gold efficient, you can go BF Sword Pickaxe and just finish a Zeal, and it's even better. So you're still going to go BF Sword Pickaxe finish a Zeal. In fact, you might go BF Sword finish a Zeal, because you want to get this efficiency as soon as possible. Zeal is insanely good. Worth noting, the movement speed is a unique passive. So stacking Zeals is not that helpful. You're only getting the 97% right here, which, hey, maybe you still want, but a pickaxe is more gold efficient than a Zeal without the move speed. So you wouldn't do like BF Sword Zeal Zeal. You do BF Sword Zeal and then either finish Hurricane or something, or finish Infinity Edge and go from there. You don't want to stack double Zeal. And then the Kirchheis Shard. Old version was this, new version's that. If you really thought the 40 damage on hit was worth 375, pro tip, it's not. It's not. Then technically that ratio got better because you're getting 25% more damage for not 25% more cost. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean anything. Technically, a beefier item gets in your inventory. No one cares. It means basically nothing. Okay, we got a big change to Runan's Hurricane. Cost is the same. The base stat's the same. The 15 on hit damage went away, but it gained way more total attack damage. Now, what's funny is I remember being in the PBE Reddit thread on this and made the point that at 100 attack damage, it breaks even. It's actually lower than 100 attack damage because Runan's Hurricane can crit. Right? You want to be at 100, like, effective attack damage after critical strike chance, which means it's even lower. So let's look at Hurricane efficiency now. Now, obviously, you lose damage on the primary bolts, right? The main damage was this, right? If your attack damage is this, counting the Hurricane crit strike chance, your auto attack DPS or your auto attack damage per hit was this, and now it's that. Obviously, it is a bit weaker, but oh well. It's down by 15 per hit. But the bolt damage, you can see at about 75 attack damage, right about here. Suddenly it's better. And it's basically impossible to have a Hurricane and not have 70 attack damage. So Hurricane is basically always better at AoE. Now, if you buy Blade of the Ruin King, you're still going to be at like 120 attack damage, and it's still 15% more damage. Not counting the Ruin King damage, of course. But in a late game scenario, we have 230 attack damage. And by the way, this is before crits. Right? The maximum value of these bolts is 40% bonus damage. Because you go from 15 to... You go from 25 to 40, which means, oh no, sorry, you can gain up to 60% more damage via the Hurricane bolts. Because you're going from 25 to 40, which is a 3/5 increase, which is 60% more damage. So in a world where you are full build and insane, your bolts are doing 1.5x or so damage. Because I have not really included Infinity Edge and stuff in this calculation. Your damage is going to go off the charts with the Hurricane. And it more than compensates. Hurricane is better. Trust. Now, worth putting out, though, if you're dueling, of course, it's worse. If you're only hitting minions with the bolts, it's worse. So you have to, need the bolts, to be fair. But yeah, it's real good. Rapid Fire Cannon, same cost still, same stats. The discharge damage went down by 40 at the end of the game, but your Energize comes in faster. I think I did a chart for that. I did. Worth pointing out that the actual scaling doesn't kick in until level like 6 or so, because you can't buy the item that early anyway. But yeah, okay, you're losing some damage on these bolts. It's not really that important. It's pretty minor. Static Shiv, damage actually goes up to champions. Damage to minions is a different conversion, which we'll show in a little bit. Obviously, the stats and costs are the same. If we look at the Static Shiv conversion, against champions, it is 20 to 30% more damage, and that can crit, so that 20% to 30% more damage is valuable, because the damage is actually significant, right? 160 damage, if you can crit for 2.5x, is 400, I want to say? This can be a 400 damage crit with an Infinity Edge. 400 damage Chain Lightning crit with Infinity Edge at level 18. That's a lot of damage. 400 to like 4 or 5 targets? 5 targets, I think it is. That's real good. Yeah, Rioter responded that Veil is 2,700, not 2,500. Yeah, so I was right in my calculations that the Veil is 2,700 gold. And that's why I put it down there, because I'm pretty sure that's what it was supposed to be. So my chart was accurate. Go me, David Phreak Turley. Now, it's worth pointing out Static Shiv is 90% as good against minions, but it gets pretty close pretty quickly. It caps out at equal. It's not a big deal. This means almost nothing. You're going to wave clear really fast regardless. It's not worse, really, enough to matter. But the more damage to champions is certainly quite nice. And Phantom Dancer is going to be 50 more gold, right? Because Zeal is cheaper, this combined cost goes up. Gold up 50. And so what I did is I always really like this. Yeah, so here's the Phantom Dancer, by the way. It was 100% gold efficient, basically. Now it's 97% gold efficient, which means you need to want these passives, but of course you're going to want the passives, so it's not exactly hard. So I did a big comparison of the 4 Zeal items now. Since they all got updates, I wanted to actually put them all on the same screen at the same time. Now they all cost the same amount of gold. So in 7.9, here's the 4 items, right? And it's worth pointing out, by the way, that Rapid Fire Cannon, then Static Shiv, then Hurricane, and Phantom Dancer have increasingly more attack speed. If you didn't know, Rapid Fire Cannon has 30, Shiv has 35, Hurricane has 40, and PD has 45. They actually have more stats as you go up the line, which is why I always organize them in this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so you can see 83% gold efficiency, 87% gold efficiency. Hurricane has 7% move speed, by the way, instead of 5, like the other items. I don't know why, it just does, but it makes it more efficient, makes it 96% efficient. And then, of course, there's that early Phantom Dancer at 97.5%. And so, when you look at these items, and you say, I want a Zeal item, I want stats. And it's, by the way, why I, never bought Rapid Fire Cannon. I always thought Rapid Fire Cannon was overrated, and this is exactly why. Because Rapid Fire Cannon is 83% efficient, and you need the Energize to be worth 440 gold, which, to be fair, it is. That's good. Obviously, it is. Bonus range, free auto attack, that's cool stuff. You energize faster, which, by the way, will synergize with Warlord's Bloodlust. It's actually really cute. Rapid Fire Cannon now has a very strong Warlord's Bloodlust synergy. Warlord's Bloodlust gives you health and move speed when you energize and attack someone. Rapid Fire Cannon gives you bonus range and energizes faster, which means I'm going to have that 700 range auto attack and then kite away from you. So it kind of doubles down into that situation. RFC will do that with Rapid Fire Cannon. But basically, if this is worth 440, and it probably is, then great. If the Chain Lightning is worth 300, then great. And again, a 400 damage burst to several champions 80% of the time feels good, man. I love Static Shiv. Hurricane, you're only spending 100 gold. To be fair, on a single target, if you are 1v1ing, Hurricane is gold inefficient. Hurricane does nothing for you single target. If you have to duel, right? If you're playing split push Callista, if you are playing 1v1 Hurricane Cannon, this is not an efficient item. Right? So you need to want the bolts. If you're playing Hurricane Teemo, you need to want the bolts for this item to be any good. Now, granted, those champions do want the wave clear, so I understand, but let's keep in mind, if you're going to play Hurricane Cannon or Hurricane Teemo, is Static Shiv not just better? Just to get the lightning out? The gold efficiency is worse, fair, but the bolts might not do much for you outside of a team fight, but the Static Shiv actually may. And I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing ideas out here, but the Chain Lightning did get buffed, and potentially, especially for the one-on-one case, maybe you just want this instead. I don't know. It's up to you. I know Hurricane Cannon makes his W go faster. That is obviously valuable. And to be fair, 100 gold for your W coming up twice as often is probably worth it, but I don't know. It's a thought, right? Phantom Dancer, again, there's the gold efficiency. I just wanted to show you this chart, give you some time to look over it, so you can make the comparisons yourself. Armor penetration got some changes. So because things have less health and more armor on them, there were some sort of reactive changes to Last Whisper, to Lord Dominic's, right? They both lost some armor. Dominic's got a bit cheaper. That's cute. Giant Slayer damage amp got a bit better. Mortal Winder just simply got cheaper for the loss of bonus armor. And then Black Cleaver just got straight nerfed by a similar sort of ratio, right? This is 7/9 is good, and this is my brain's not working. 4/6. No, what? 4/5. 80% versus 77%. Okay, so they got nerfed by about the same amount. Anyway, doesn't really matter too much. So I just did this. So what I did for gold efficiency on this, because they only exist in one place, is I assumed Giant Slayer was gold efficient, and I assumed old Last Whisper was gold efficient, which means that new Last Whisper obviously is not super gold efficient. But Lord Dominic's, because of the cheaper cost and the Giant Slayer getting better, technically Lord Dominic's is more gold efficient. But this, again, is making the assumption that Giant Slayer is properly costed and that old Last Whisper was properly costed. You know, maybe Armor Pen was underappreciated. Maybe percent health conversion was overappreciated. I don't know what to tell you. You have to come up with those situations yourself. Honestly, I could have done a whole bunch of math on like, what is your ideal target? And it was too much for me to really go into. Honestly, you're now in situations where they need to have more armor for it to matter to you, and they need to have less health for it to matter to you. But the cheaper cost really helps that quite a bit. Mortar Reminder just kind of got less efficient, actually. The 100 gold does not make up for the Armor Pen that was lost. So Mortar Reminder is actually technically less efficient. That said, if everyone's buying these same items that they were before, if they're buying the same Randuin's Omens and the same Dead Man's Plate and the same Sunfire Cape, then everyone's armor values just are higher. And if that's the case, if their armor values simply are higher, then this 35 armor pen can go about as far as the 45 armor pen did in the previous build. So it's not as bad as it looks. We'll see. Honestly, it's whatever. I mean, the thing is, like, AD carries got buffed, right? These items got cheaper and of similar efficiency. These items all got straight buffed, except Phantom Dancer, which we weren't really buying. Only Yasuo did that, and screw Yasuo. Yasuo sucks. Infinity Edge got cheaper, Zeal got cheaper, so they're power spiking earlier by 300 gold. And IE, of course, now competes with Blade of the Ruin King on the same cost. So that's kind of cool. Okay, there's more. Don't worry.